Hi all and welcome to another week of the Truth, Honour and Integrity Show. My name's Thomas Williams and tonight is December the 14th. Hi all and welcome to another week of the Truth, Honour and Integrity Show. The first of two shows in 2 nights. There'll be another one tomorrow. Because there's too much information in this one and that needs to be kept separate, and hopefully maybe certain things will unfold that will negate that particular show, but we'll see. So there'll be a show tomorrow at 7:30. It'll be probably a shortened version than tonight, and I was struggling which songs to pick for tonight's show, because there's shall I open with Land of Confusion? There's a lot of confusion going on. Should I open for Waiting for the Hammer to Fall? And so in the end I chose What's This Life For? and Born Free, because it's a reminder to us all of what life is all about, and how important it is for all of us, and also a reminder that we were born free. We were only captured as life went on. Some of it was our own doing, but most of it is because of the clowns and deceivers in our midst who have no compunction but to dominate, control and sacrifice us at any and all cost. So it's a strange time. The other song I was going to pick is Inception, Time. Of course, time is an illusion, but it's not when you're waiting for something to happen, and we've all been waiting for long enough. We've all had the promises of this and promises of that, and we've had to unlearn some of the stuff, some of which I'll be going through tomorrow. But it is time, and it will get ugly. There's no question of that, because the psychopaths are insistent on keeping going at all costs. You'll hear some in the of what's took place in the intel in the second hour, but they're not going away. But rest assured, neither are we. We will not kowtow to their fear. We will not kowtow to their threats either. Bring it on, that's what I say. But it will get unpleasant. Right, let's get into the main, the usual for the show. And the emails for the show is truth.honour.and.integrity@gmail.com. The link for the show is www.spreaker.com/user/8955881. And the articles website, which you can also get all the archived shows. You can also listen to this show live. I've been told that the submit the questions button for that site is not working. Actually, we may take it away because it's becoming more and more difficult for the admins to collect questions via the emails, which only I attend to, and MeWe and the Facebook page. So the articles website is thinkdifferent.thepeoplesclub.org. We have a Facebook social media alternative on MeWe.com /join/truth-honour, 4 dashes followed by integrity. Or you can send an email to truth, honour and integrity @gmail.com, and we can add you that way if you can't find it. We have the People's Club donations website link and everything that's to do with the foundation once we get funded properly, and that's at thepeoplesclub.org. where do we start? We're going to go into some news. We've got bits of intel, the usual op-ed pieces, including a lengthy warning about fun and games to do with conferences. So that's coming up after the news, which is as follows. Well, there's not just the fires going on in California. A Washington state man who had bilked investors out of more than $100 million in a Ponzi scheme has, lo and behold, escaped from a federal prison in Central California. I wonder who he's connected to. And this is according to the US Marshal Services. Prison officials said Derek Darren Berg, who's 55, was discovered missing on Wednesday from a security work camp next to a penitentiary in Atwater, California. Berg, back in 2012, was sentenced in federal court in Seattle to 18 years after pleading guilty to wire fraud, money laundering and bankruptcy fraud. 18 years. I can think of a number of other groups and people who should be getting that similar term for the same thing. Prosecutors said at the time it was the largest fraud scheme they had prosecuted in Western Washington. Berg used investment funds from his company, the Meridian Group. Interesting. For those of you who want to go and research that group, to buy 2 Lear jets, several yachts, and billion-dollar condos and homes in Washington state and California over the course of a decade. Yes. There's a few in the alt media who were buying similar, who eventually got exposed. Morgan Stanley, or Morgan Chase, or Chase Bank, or just perhaps the easiest term is rogues, have decided this week to fire former US Democratic lawmaker Harold Ford Jr., who is a managing director at the Wall Street Bank, for inappropriate conduct. Really? Is there anyone in the higher echelons of Morgan Stanley who hasn't done inappropriate conduct? Ford, who is a frequent guest on news and finance TV shows, served 5 terms in the US House of Representatives for Tennessee's 9th District before joining Morgan Stanley in 2011. The spokeswoman for Morgan Stanley said Ford was let go for conduct inconsistent with our values, I didn't realise they had any, and in violation of our policies. Ford did not immediately respond to requests for comments, and the news of Ford's departure was first reported by the Huffington Post, of all people, which cited interviews with an unnamed woman who claimed Ford had harassed her on a night several years ago. Awful lot of them, isn't it? You'll find out the real reason behind that later on. It's all good. The more they get exposed, the better. Because the more can be removed. But there is a hidden agenda with it. And here's another one. Dylan Farrow. The son of a more famous Mia Farrow is now questioning why the media's spotlight that's fallen on other Hollywood men accused of sexual assault hasn't been focused on her adoptive father, the actor and filmmaker Woody Allen. Indeed. Perhaps his nationality is more a key. Maybe not. The title of the piece, penned by Farrow, whose mum is Mia Farrow and whose brother Ronan Farrow has been investigating Hollywood's harassment problem. It's funny how they always play it down with harassment. You know, harassment can be just annoying somebody or throwing bits of paper at them. This is far worse, and the words should be stated accordingly. sexual predator, not harassment. And they've questioned why the hashtag #MeToo revolution has spared Woody Allen. He went on to say, "I've long maintained that when he, sorry. Was it he or she? I forget now anyway. When I was 7 years old, Woody Allen led me into an attic away from babysitters who had been instructed never to leave me alone with him. He then sexually assaulted me," and Dylan writes, "I told the truth to your authorities then, and I've been telling it unaltered for more than 20 years. Yes, indeed, Mr. Allen. Mia Farrow wasn't exactly of age when those two got together either, so he has history. Now, we covered this item last week to do with President Trump announcing rather wrongly, in my opinion, because I think we've got enough issues in this country without interfering in other people's countries or what they're doing. But Mr. Trump decided in his wisdom to announce that Jerusalem is Israel's capital. But that's surprisingly been dismissed by a number of former United States ambassadors to Israel. All but 2 of the 11 former United States ambassadors to Israel said President Trump's decision to recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital thought the plan was wrong-headed, dangerous, and deeply flawed. Interesting. The 11 ex-envoys all closely followed Mr. Trump's announcement last Wednesday, in which he also set in motion a plan to move the American embassy to Jerusalem from Tel Aviv. Even those who agreed that Mr. Trump was recognizing the reality on the ground disagreed with his approach, making a major diplomatic concession without any evident gain in return. Indeed, we'll find out at a later date as to what the reasoning was behind that. It may be good, it may not be. Further news to do with Israel and Palestine. The US envoy to the United Nations, Nikki Haley, this week has accused the United Nations of damaging the prospects for peace between Israel and the Palestinians. The organisation has outrageously been one of the world's most foremost centres of hostility towards Israel, she said. Mrs. Haley was addressing an emergency meeting of the Security Council after Donald Trump's decision to move the US Embassy to Jerusalem. She went on and said the decision recognises the obvious. I have to disagree with that. History doesn't show any evidence, but according to Mrs. Haley anyway, that we have to recognise the obvious, that Jerusalem is the capital of Israel. On Friday, following that decision, a Palestinian man died after Israeli troops shot at people throwing stones earlier on last Friday. And the second was reported to be in critical condition. The following day, Israeli aircraft attacked Hamas military facilities in Gaza in response to the alleged rocket attack, and the area's hospital said 14 people were wounded. A further 217 Palestinians were wounded in confrontations in the West Bank and East Jerusalem. Further on in the West Bank, Israeli forces clashed with Palestinians in the city of Bethlehem, Ramallah, Hebron and Nablus, as well as other smaller locations. Thousands of pro-Palestinian protesters held noisy demonstrations in Jordan, Egypt, Iraq, Turkey, Tunisia and Iran. Further afield, protesters rallied in Malaysia, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Afghanistan and India administered Kashmir and also Indonesia. So that is the impact of that statement, and it would have been better that we stayed out of it. One statement from one person in the world and you've got all kinds of people injured, all kinds of clashes in, what, 10, 12 countries. It's something that we really should have stayed out of. The rights or wrongs of it, what I believe, doesn't really matter. It's what's right and what's wrong, and we should have stayed out of it. So, of course, the war between Israel and Palestine continues. And the UN, in my opinion, should have stepped in a long time ago. When Israel started building the wall, they should have took it down and put UN troops there. And if Palestine people fire rockets, then they need to deal with them. If Israeli troops are firing and smashing down olive groves, then they need to deal with them. Problem solved. But that's not how it works, is it? It's the UN has no real mandate or purpose. It's just another arm of the cabal who get what they want. But, you know, they're calling it a war over there. But there's a distinct difference. Israel, 3,930 tanks. Palestine, 0. Israel planes, 326. Palestine planes, 0. No ships either. That's not a war. This is on a wider scale, atypical of a cabal-driven war, where bully boys with all the toys, the weaponry, annihilate countries and the people who can't defend themselves with higher weaponry power. It says it all. Dylan is a she, I thought she was. You never know these days. We thought the First Lady was a she, remember? Ah, well. Nearly 200,000 residents. I will repeat again, I warned of this 4 years ago. 200,000 residents have now been evacuated from their homes in California as firefighters battle several raging wildfires. And the governor, Nazi himself, Mr. Jerry Brown, or Brown Shirt, more apt, declared a state of emergency in San Diego on Thursday after a new blaze spread from 10 acres to 4,100 acres in just a few hours. Well, it will, won't it? 3 firefighters have been injured and a further one today, and about 500 buildings destroyed. That has now increased from when I took that news piece up. I think that was Monday or Tuesday. I'll have more on that later. The Navajo Nation announced this Tuesday, and this is a good sign. I think you're going to see a lot more of this. That it's suing Wells Fargo, as in what the for allegedly engaging in predatory and unlawful banking practices that targeted and harmed tribal members. In a statement, the Navajo Nation president, Russell Begay, said the tribe's lawyer had been directed to seek restitution, damages and civil penalties against Wells Fargo on alleged violations of federal, state and also tribal law. The tribe alleges employees at Wells Fargo branches on the vast reservation routinely misled customers into opening unnecessary accounts and obtained debit and credit cards without customers' consent. Interesting. Of course, as they open accounts, they then use that as an asset. That's what they were doing, making their asset sheet look a lot more than it was. More accounts, more business, more debt. That's how it works. But debt for bankers is classed as an asset. They also allege Navajo elders were purposely confused and deceived into purchasing products to help employees meet banking quotas. The suit filed in a federal court in New Mexico said since at least 2009 and continuing through 2016, Wells Fargo employees at branches on the Navajo Nation routinely opened unauthorized savings and credit accounts and misled customers into opening unnecessary accounts, which obtained debit cards without customers' consent and enrolled customers in online banking without proper consent. That's the way the banks work. I'll probably leave that to the last. Not as much in the news. I know we've got a lot of questions, so we'll get through the news section. We'll go into the op-ed and see if we can run through some more questions. So it was announced today the vote was in favour for net neutrality, and it appears there's no end to them interfering with anything and everything that we do. My opinion on it is I wish we had an alternative. A complete alternative. And the approval of FCC Chairman Ajit Pai proposal marked a victory for internet service providers like AT&T, Comcast and Verizon, and hands them the power over what content consumers can access. AT&T, Comcast and Verizon. You want your voice heard? Dropped them three altogether. That's the only thing they understand. If the public withdraws their support and they have no companies left, then they'll have to go away. The likes of Sprint and the Metro PCS and some of the other phone platforms, it's time for them to campaign on behalf of the people so that they will collect all the subscribers and put those three companies out of business. That's how it works. But a call out, because I think it's time for someone who's clever with these type of platforms that can make phones minus spyware, minus cabal ran corporations, and also a new internet platform with the same. No Microsoft, no Google, no spyware, no backdoors, no data collecting and no interference. I'm sure there's people in our community who are capable of setting up those two platforms, and I'm sure if it's ready we would be able to get some sort of funding for this and shut these clans down altogether, telling us what we can and cannot watch and see and read. At the time we told them we don't want to use their vehicles for the internet, be it cable or phone. So, where are we next? Debt. Well, according to the to the media, dare I say it, Mr. Trump as well, the economy is booming, or so they say. Lowest jobless rate for a number of years, which all sounds very good. Except, why is there 146 million Americans on benefits and 47 million on food stamps? The two don't equate. And what's worse is 1/3, 33% of Americans are weighed down by overdue debt, meaning their outstanding payments are in arrears and have been handed off to debt collectors. So that's only the ones that have been handed off, 1/3. You're probably going to find that there's over half of Americans are in total debt. It's only 1/3 that's been handed off to the debt collectors, which I might add have no clout whatsoever, because you didn't borrow off those people. And this is according to a new research by the Urban Institute, who went on to say it's not a healthy situation for households because overdue debt can lower one's credit score, making it harder to finance purchases such as a home or a car, while also making it more expensive to borrow money. Indeed. 146 million on benefits, 47 million on food stamps, and 110 million overdue in debt. But the economy's booming. Yeah, right. This will probably be, where are we? The last. I was going to put this in the op-ed pieces, but this will be the last news item for now. But the Pope, fresh from making other astounding comments recently about Jesus being metaphorical, allegedly anyway. And he's now saying he has revealed he wants a change to the Lord's Prayer. Well, if you type in the Lord's Prayer, you'll see there's various versions already. How many more do we need or want, where they just change words? This is how they get away with legal things for the United States and of. Just change the words around. As the Pope thinks the current version implies that God pushes people towards sin. Of course, the God of sin is knowledge. Of course, according to the church, sin is doing wrong. So if you obtain knowledge, you've committed a sin. See how they mess the words around and mess with your head? The God of knowledge is called sin. Adds a whole new slant to the Adam and Eve stuff, doesn't it? So according to the Pope, the current version implies that God pushes people towards sin. Which God and which sin? And he said the line, "Lead us not into temptation," which is memorized by hundreds of millions of Christians for centuries, is based on flawed translation. Really? That's a bit like the Bible then, isn't it? He went on, it's not a good translation because it speaks of a God who induces temptation, the Pope said. The implication is awkward for Christians who believe it is Satan who tempts people to sin. Really, is there one and a difference? So for the benefit of those who don't go on the Facebook page, I've decided to add my piece of humour and do my own Lord's Prayer the Lord being Anu, and that is a fact. I know some people won't like that, but it is what it is. So here's my version of the Lord's Prayer. Our Anu, who art in hell, we are not in your name. The kingdom of Manna has come, and thy will be done on heaven and our earth. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our sins as we forgive the sins your people did to us. Lead us not into temptation, and deliver us from your evil. For thine is the kingdom of Manna. We have the power and the glory forever and ever. And you can stick your amen, as in Amun, where the sun don't shine. People of earth. Heart. So that should take us nicely into the break, and we'll be back with some intel. Not as much as I would have liked, but I'll be going and hinting at a few things and some op-ed pieces. So here's the land of confusion. Hi all, and welcome back. Some intel, a few bits. The events unfolded this week in Alabama. I'm not going to say too much yet. I'm waiting for more details, but the bits that I've got is not all is what it seems of what's going on in Alabama regarding the voting. There is massive evidence of voting fraud, and implications will follow in the near term. That's all I'll say on that. New York. Now that event on Monday was as predictable as night following day. Two reasons. Iraq had announced at the end of ISIS control, and also the financial failures reared up again. Of course, New York being the financial centre, and both of them are connected with New York being the financial district, and also the rogue UN that's on our soil. Was it a distraction, or was it a petulant attempt against the public the day they failed to deliver their promised RV again? Except now we have a big issue in this country. Back in September, when the budget was kicked down the road for a further 2 months, which ran out 2 days ago, and a further extension was done last week and runs out next week. Those extensions, like all the previous other ones, was for them to deliver the RV. Give them time, the Rothschilds and the Chinese elders and the bogus dragons, more time to deliver the RV. They should have listened. You could have told them 4 years ago it would never happen. So for the past 13 months, America and the government have been running on credit only. There was no money left after the Rothschilds emptied all the accounts. And it was all that credit was put forward on the provision that the RV would be forthcoming from the Rothschilds and the Chinese elders. You know what happens next. I will say more about that tomorrow, so I'm going to go into it deeper. But you need cash as much as you can. Doesn't mean you don't have to go overboard. You may also need some provisions. to get you by over the Christmas and early New Year. So take heed of that warning. The internet is awash with various things at the moment, and people are struggling. Maybe coming to this show I make more sense than others, maybe not. But everything on the internet now appears more and more difficult to nail down to in a defined group. Who's who and what's what, and who's doing who, what, when, where and why. Is this decision correct? Like the net neutrality. Do we know it's for our benefit or do we not? And there's so many examples of that. And I criticise Langley heavily in this show, but there are elements of support in there. Same applies to the Pentagon, the UN, and the US Inc. military. Even the former Illuminati are now split into 5 factions. Now, overall, they all still want control of us, but the specific factions wants to control all of it. Be it the Asian faction, the Secret Society, the Zionist faction, the Nazi faction, or the Jesuit. None of them are offering us any sort of real change whatsoever. They'll just carry on the former control system with them at the head of it. Just massive dick swinging on a planetary-wide scale. But we are getting some benefit as they take each other out, and that will increase. But the days of their white hats and their black hats are now gone. You have to grasp that, because defining who is not so easy on this world anymore. It's just not. It's not easy out there, and it's not easy on the internet either. I try to help as much as I can. This is why I did the faction show 2 years ago, to give people a chance to absorb it, process it, and then work out for themselves who's who and who's going where, what, when and why. It's not easy, you know, and I gave a warning of this a few months ago when if war broke out, how are we going to know who's who? This is the danger going forward. If chaos unfolds, nobody's going to know. You know, they're not all going to wear brown shirts and march with big black or brown boots with the Nazi insignia on. They're not all going to wear blue UN hats. So this is where the confusion will reign. If the military suddenly came on our streets, which is actually illegal according to their constitution, not ours, how do we know that they're not working as part of the US Inc. rogue military or part of ours, supporting us? And it's going to be very difficult going forward, and I understand if you all are struggling with it at various times, but this is the way they designed it, so you don't. But just when you think you know what's going on, they twist it to suit their own ends. But this show will continue to point out where the issues lie. I think that's kind of why most people like this show, is because I make people understand it in an easier way. Not always, but in most aspects of it. But labelling one group white hats without knowing who's in it is a dangerous game at this moment. Because those white hats may have a pointy hat. See the dangers? I came across something rather interesting this week. Prince Harry in the UK, one of the royals, along with Prince Andrew and also Princess Anne, were awarded or enrolled this year as Knights of the Grand Cross. No surprise there, you may say, but you know how the elites love their titles and honours they award to each other. A bit like the Grammys and all the other red carpet nonsense. So we can all marvel and put them on a pedestal above us, except they're not. Except this particular Grand Cross came under the order of Isabella the Catholic. And this is a Spanish award. Now, the reason why I'm pointing this out is the UK is the Church of England, which is Protestant, not Catholic. And here we have three prominent members of the so-called royal family switching allegiances. Something to watch. California. I'll have some more on that tomorrow. But the question or thoughts I came up with this week is something for people to ponder. It's not burning organic stuff. Trees are standing still. Fires rage. And inorganic is being turned to dust. And whilst I'm pleased, what I do find suspicious is a fire of that depth. And I mentioned in the news piece earlier, it went from, 10 acres to 4,100 acres. Not one person has died. That I find very suspicious. I'm glad it's the case, don't get me wrong, but I still find it rather suspicious. Could it be the evidence of synths? Could these events also be threats to the Hollywood people to keep their mouths shut? Burning them out. We were talking about time earlier and time last week, how it flies. Of course, it's now 5 years ago today for the infamous Sandy Hook false flag event. 5 years. And yet 5 years on, and there's still no corroborating evidence to support their claims that 20 children and 6 adults died at the hands of a psychopathic gunman that day. 5 years later on. No video, no pictures, nothing. Now, one of those adults who actually turned up and did a radio interview on the radio show Interview on the afternoon after the event, and then turned up at the Boston Marathon false flag event. Yes, you, the teacher. Remember the heroic teacher who saved so many children but lost her life? Well, she was on a radio show that very afternoon and also turned up being interviewed by the fake media at the Boston Marathon. Question remains about Sandy Hook 5 years later on is, where is all the donation money? Where did it go? And who benefited? Things that make you go, earthquakes in Delaware last week, or the Delaware, Maryland, Washington area, and also near Fort Bragg today. I'm not going to say any more. There was a piece on the page. Someone posted about the latest offering of words by Anna von Reitz, Inga. And she often writes good stuff. Some of the letters and the knowledge she has is extraordinary. But sometimes she has things kind of off. And the article that was posted yesterday or this morning raised the issue of the US Army being in control here. Now, either that is a mistaken statement or a deliberate attempt to deflect. The US Army is not in control here. They never have been in control here. The group that's in control is the naval people. Why? Because they're maritime law. They're also in control of the ET disclosure narrative. They have full control over all ET issues. It is the naval people who control the Majestic 12. There are other elements of the military on the panel who actually want the ET disclosure out because they're kind of envious that all the funding, the black ops and the black budgets go to the naval element. The Air Force are kind of pissy because they think, well, they're aerial craft, so we should be in control of it. But the US Army is not in control here. The naval intelligence people play a big role in the powers that be, and more so over the ET issue. The question people need to ask or ponder on is, why is the naval bases in the middle of land in America? Some will be aware of that. There's one in the northern part of Florida, in the middle of the forest, with no river outlet. Why would you have a naval base in the middle of land? Did the Air Force have bases in the middle of the ocean? Did the Army have bases in the air or in the middle of the ocean? Something to ponder. Right. There was a mention about issues surrounding the alternative media conferences, and I've highlighted some of the issues. These are the bigger conferences. And this is not just purely an attack on the Blue Chicken Group, because it applies to other people as well. And the issues of people being attacked physically and energetically is a big, big problem at these alternative media conferences. Not just the Corey Good ones, a number of others. ESETI is another one. The Ancient Aliens ones. And I will tell you why. Now, people will remember who have been tuned in to this show since we started, roughly 19 months ago. I've warned people to stay away from the super soldier based groups also, because they are connected, like the Bases Project with Miles Johnson. The same reasons. Some very, very dodgy people connected with those groups. That doesn't mean to say all super soldiers are bad, but they have all worked for the rogue elements here and afar. Some of them, as you will know, are trying to break free of their programming, but a lot of them are connected to the covens, whether they like that fact or not. Now, I get why people go to these big conferences, as I went to one myself. I only went to one. That was Awake and Aware 2011, and it was kind of a watershed conference because everything after that disintegrated in many ways. Big name people were co-opted. Big name people were exposed following that event. But I get why people go. They feel part of a greater community meeting, a chance to meet like-minded people, and also the named people on the stage who they have read about and or seen on the videos. But that can also come at a great cost for those not sufficiently aware of the dark arts and magic that's prevalent in those events. The reality is the alternative media has been hacked and is driven for the public face as a money marketing ploy, and sadly all too often that works for the many, be it the speakers or the participants. So where did all this program start? Well, you have to go back to the late 1800s and Madame Blavatsky, who practically wrote the program for the New Age movement, which was carried on by Rudolf Steiner, he of the Waldorf School fame, and also Aleister Crowley. And the New Age is basically a watered down version of the religious program, which they knew back then they were going to collapse the religious program and proffer up a new directive. And this is what they've been doing over the last 40 years. A replacement religion with the same rhetoric where everything is outside of yourself and you fail to look inwards, which is where all the answers are. They realised back in the 1800s that they would never be able to achieve 100% followers to a religious program, which is also connected to a reptilian group, aka the serpent race. There's evidence all over the Vatican for people who can look with an open mind. It's there to see. The big egg outside. Well, what the lizards come out of? Eggs. Look at the roof. It's got scales and snake eyes. Look at the bronze statue. The throne with the Pope sits below it. Half man, half reptilian. It's all there in your face. So everything became mashed in symbolism that once you see, you will wonder how you missed it all. The griffins and all the other statues that they have. Now, in reality, some parts of it is a total distraction, the New Age and religion, from the power of the self. And in some aspects, religion and New Age can provide that for you. But they are just the hidden hooks that pull you in. That's what it's designed for, to pull you in. And humanity, once it's pulled in, is then in trouble, not from the program, but from ourselves. And the prime reason is we don't like being wrong. And unfortunately, some will steadfastly hold on to that wrong path, even when our own intuition is screaming at us to let it go. We've all done that. this aspect of the program to ourselves. And the question is, how far do you as an individual go with it? Some go their whole lifetimes minding religion, and Jesus is coming to save them. But the question remains, what if everyone reincarnated on this planet at the moment is Jesus or Mary? Who saves you then? So, do you blindly carry on or listen to yourself? And here's a few examples of the self-questioning your belief system, whether that is religion, New Age, political, or main players in the alternative media. Is the minute you start asking questions to others on that subject is when you need to look deeper into that aspect of what you are following. If you're asking people, is Thomas valid, or yes or no, you have your own doubts. If you're asking, is Corey Goodman blue chickens right, they're your own doubts. We all have doubts about everyone. It's human nature. But if it starts niggling and niggling away, then you really need to look deeper at it from your aspect, not look for confirmation or validation from somebody else. So when you start saying that some of the aspects of this, his or her narrative doesn't make sense, then it's your own subconscious trying to poke out into the conscious realm. That's how it works. That you as an individual needs to look deeper and with a total blank slate and look at the information again. There may be some aspects, maybe a lot of aspects of it that's right, but is there a hook at the end of it? Religion itself, lots of nice narratives and some morals, but that's not what it's for. Many of you have now found that out. If it was all nice narrative and all about morals, then why have we got virtually every church corrupt and or interfering with children? Why have churches got vast wealth and the parishioners have got nothing? You know, the Catholic Church itself, it's in a vast number of countries that are what would be classed as third world. Why haven't those churches looked after those people? So the morals of the teachings are kind of wasted by the people who actually promote it. So it's all about how long you choose to hold on to your belief system of what you believe in. A recent example is Trump. I warned back in 2015 of his known links to AIPAC, the Jewish group, pro-Jewish group, of which his son-in-law is one of them. But people didn't want to hear it then. And largely they don't want to hear it now either, as they'd set their heart on Trump, the outsider coming in and cleaning the swamp, which he still may do. But is that swamp selective? That is the key. Is it selective to removing certain factions at the behest of one other? Time will tell. Trump also came in with political rhetoric that people wanted to hear, like America First. But here we are 12 months later, and how much has really gone down the swamp? Some would argue a lot, and some would say not much. Some are still seeing the likes of the entity known as Hillary Clinton, Bill Clinton, Bushes, McCain's, Cheneys and Rumsfelds, all still running around, allegedly. Like I said, time will tell. Has Mr. Trump pulled all our troops back to safety, or has he increased troops in Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, and also threatened the world with nuclear war over North Korea? Is that what the people wanted? Is that an example of America first? Now, whether you like Trump or not, it clearly isn't, is it? It's put us under more threat. We've had enough threats to last us a lifetime. We don't need to go around threatening other people's countries or interfering with which capital belongs to which country. It's none of our business. And it's not something I want to see Trump take part in. So the jury's out for me. Time will tell how much he delivers. Time will also tell whether he's delivering on behalf of one of the factions. We will get benefits from it. I'll keep saying that, because we will. Because if 4 factions go down and we're left with 1, it's a far easier task to remove the 1 than it is the 5. So, Trump plays his trump card, pun intended, and gets right in bed with, from what appears to me, with the Zionist faction. Agenda of Israel claiming the capital of Jerusalem and ultimately leading to a caliphate for the whole of the Middle East. I hope not. Wall height and length will increase, and the serpent race will rule from there again, as the New World Order, with one world government, one world currency, which will be fresh air tokens, and one world religion. We'll be all bound down to the lizard people. Don't believe me? Fine. But all I'm asking you is to look into the possibility and see what has unfolded over the last 100 years. All of it is centralised into one region. Was it because Jesus was there 2,000 years ago? But if Jesus was that important, why have they changed his name? The letter J never came into our language until the 14th century. Oops. Now, I kind of give pointers towards things, but unless it has a darker agenda, I will not. I try not to anyway. Sometimes you get a bit excited or a bit annoyed and you're out certain things on certain people, which some like and some don't. But I will not impose on others who choose to follow Alex Jones. I've made myself quite clear who Jones is with. I think it's quite clear by who he's supporting Jones is with. And then you've got the likes of the Kent Dunns, Larrabee, and even some aspects of the narrative of Drake. You know, I can take it or leave it. But others, like the Blue Chicken Group, the Super Soldier Group, the Channeling Group, and the Keenan with his background of reptilian ran dragon groups that are also backed by Langley, then I will be more forthright on those groups, because they have a hidden agenda. They can cause greater damage. People are just spouting bullshit that there's raids on Langley. It's neither here nor there. But when there's part of a hidden agenda, that is when I choose to step in. Ultimately, at the end of the day, it's your choice, the choice of yours, of what you choose to read and or follow. The problem we face is, again, largely self-imposed by the label being awake. And yes, we all are. But let us all of us that included, not make the mistake of thinking because we are awake, we should know everything. That's not fair on ourselves. It's not possible to know everything. Now, some people will think, well, Thomas has got a vast knowledge base, which I have to a degree, but I learn something new every day. Things change. Situations change. People change. Groups change. Like I mentioned earlier, I'll slam Langley because of the rogue elements, and there's more rogue than good. But that kind of negates what the good people in there are doing also. So it's about learning something new every day. You know, lots fit into the information that I've presented in the various shows, but sometimes it doesn't. For me and you. The way I tend to go about things is don't ignore the difference. Just look into it more for greater clarity. As I've said before, it's far more important for me to get as near as the truth as possible than me being right. It just doesn't matter whether I'm right or wrong. But what does matter to me is I get as near to the truth as possible that's presented in these shows. Of course, sometimes being too right can cause frustrations. You can ask Chloe. You can ask Chloe about that. But ultimately, this show is geared towards all levels of learning and is all striving towards a goal of truth, honour and integrity, not just me, all of us. So, I've kind of gone off track there, but back to the topic and the hijacking of our movement. And yes, we've been hijacked. The alternative media has been hijacked big time and has now become a money marketing ploy, like I said earlier. That's just the surface. It's what's hidden underneath that's more dangerous. Be it the conferences, donation funds, selling magic crystals, magic stones, accessing your Akashic, free energy machines, healing machines, and a plethora of various types of readings, chakra removal, entity removals. Buy my books and videos, many of which have been plagiarized. Fix your Kundalini, which is a symbol of the serpent, I might add. And the list goes on. That, what I've just described, is a whole chunk of people operating inside the alternative media. Now, are there good people in some of them? Yeah. There's no disputing that. But they're using our movement to make money, offering all kinds of rogue treatments that have no validation for who and what we are. You know, chakra removal. And they're charging $300 for that. Would you know if your chakras are gone or not? The average person? Not really. You've just lost $300 trying to find out. Someone's going to access your Akashic record, Mr. Bartes. Really? Which one? There's multi-dimensional aspects of the you. This version here is a small part. So which Akashic record are they accessing? One on the earth plane, the etheric, lower astral, higher astral, mental planes if you're lucky. And this is, to me, I find it kind of sad. But the money markets employ is one thing, but the sinister elements behind it that are far worse. Of course, they've installed agency stooges also throughout our community to peddle a plot that we've been fighting against. Pushing dinars, zims and dongs that were largely the spoils of war, but also part of their bogus printing scheme to get rid of them by selling them to the very people threatening their empire. See how they've turned it back on us? This is why I said the movement's been hijacked. With the promise of untold riches is the RV is established. So now the people who were fighting against them are now playing the game with them. It's all very clever. But it also shows how easily the awake people can be fooled also. Unless you take a step back and analyse. Then you make far more sense of what's going on. Now, the reality is that the deeper layers, which the deeper you get, it becomes far darker. Someone making money off plagiarising books is one thing, but there's elements within our community who go far worse. And there are far darker elements, and that has the capability of resetting your whole reality belief pattern. And this is where the conferences issue comes in, as most people are going for the information and possibly an excitement factor of meeting some who are considered famous. But those conferences are a viper's nest of hidden entities, and I don't say that lightly, because there is. And dark magicians, the majority of people don't believe exists until you find out the hard way. Or they block off the reality due to fear or knowledge limitation. But the dark magicians come to these events because the people attending are seeking the hidden knowledge, and that has been denied to us. So you are more open in your headspace to accept this new knowledge. Not new knowledge, but relearned knowledge. But some of this knowledge has been, as we all know, has been repackaged to cause more distraction and confusion. And this is where the dark magicians come to play. By messing with your head and sidetracking your path. Then you have the jinns, who are also heavily prevalent in these events. You might see a waft of smoke or something in the corner of your eye. They're the jinns. They just operate just outside our visible spectrum. And they are there to infiltrate you and influence your thinking process and send you insane. They do have that capability. Or, at the very least, send you into a period of self-doubt, which is a big problem for everyone that we face daily. The self-doubt. Am I on the right path? Am I doing the right thing? Am I doing the right job? Should I move house? Doubt, 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 doubt. Well, it's only little old me. Really. It's no little old anyone. Once you recognise your own power. So this is where they play on our weaknesses. Demon spirits are then called on. Some of them by magic stones and crystals. Oops. That these people who are selling these stones realises it can have entities attached to it, or dark energy. do they have that knowledge base to understand it? I had one member from Cosmic Voice who'd bought these trinkets from all over the world at so-called ancient sites, and he was riddled with entities and dark spirits because he wasn't aware. Those entities nearly killed his wife. This is what we're dealing with, the hidden world that most either don't believe in until it's too late. You know, there's lots of paranormal shows on the TV about ghosts and the damage that can claw you right down your back, or worse. But if you can't see it, it doesn't exist. But like we've pointed out many times before, the eyes deceive. You look down a railway track. Does the railway track go to infinity? No, it doesn't. It's the same width all the way along, but your eyes don't tell you that, do they? It goes to a point. Many examples of how eyes can deceive. So we have the demon spirits who can be called in by someone who thinks they're a shaman, when the reality is most of the so-called shamans in America are frauds. You don't come a shaman by doing ceremonies and training for less than 1 year. Sorry, you just don't. And a lot of them are inexperienced and don't know what they're dealing with either. And then you add in, which I saw vast evidence of, the agency people in these conferences spying on you. Who's with who? Does someone have opinions? Does someone talk about their abilities, or that they've seen ETs, or they've had paranormal experiences? It's all collecting data on you. There are hybrid entities that appear at these conferences also, some good, many not, and the occasional shapeshifter. Now basically what you've done by attending some of these conferences is you've immersed yourself into a 3D version of the lower astral night realm. You want to know where all your nightmares come from? You've just visited and paid $200 to $300 in a conference for the same experience. Now, some of the issues to do with connections stem from Project Camelot, and more in particular Project Avalon. Is they are using and have done their influence to bring people forward, not only to expand their money marketing programs, that's the low end, but to find out which in the community have started to access their abilities. People who have had strange experiences that will help others explain theirs. Both groups, but more so Avalon, which is Bill Ryan, and also frequented by Simon Parkes. Their sole operation was finding out who is who, and more importantly, who has the abilities or past memories. That information is then passed on to their contacts, and then those individuals then become a target of attack from the hidden demons, magicians and jinns. Now the problem, like I keep saying, is most people don't think it's possible, and so your barriers go down and your whole energy vessel becomes open to looshing at best, but also far worse. like I mentioned earlier, my issue with Corey is not so much he's bullshitting over the blue avians. Whether blue avians exist or not is not really that relevant. And if that was all he was pushing, I personally would just ignore it. A bit like the Sam Muggsy shows. People want to spout crap. Let them. As long as the agenda's not deeper. But my issue is the deeper layer that are knowingly operating in and of running a program for the covens. Then it becomes an issue. Covens are the dark magicians. So now you can see the issues merging with these conferences, and Corey's sidekick, or handler, whichever way you look at it, Mr. Wilcock, has been running this program far longer. That clown was stating and talking about mass arrests back in 2002 under the pseudonym Art Aqua, which is his Skype address. Now my issue is not that he's BSing people, but he's pushing a harvesting style program implemented by Ra, the fake solar god, and his Lord of One. Yes, it's the Lord of one world government, one world currency, and one world religion, all under the control of the serpent race. And Wilcock knows this. He admitted himself this year he inadvertently, which is my ass, wrote the program for the cabal in a previous lifetime. The man told you. Like I said earlier, inadvertently, my ass, Mr. Wilcock. You think you can fake who you really are, but we know. And you know we know. The Contact in the Desert advertisement board had stated they were going to plant seeds for the children over the next 3 years, which is indicative and funny, having mentioned that in a recent op-ed piece about the 2020 being a key time. So what happens after you've planted the seeds with Lord of One and Ra? The children get harvested. So now you can see why I have issues with that group. It's all there once you can see yourself, and I prefer you to see it yourself rather than just following what I say. I'm going to point out the hidden elements that a lot of you may not be aware of. So the choice will always be yours of whether you choose to go to these events. But unless you are stacked with abilities, you do leave yourself wide open for full-scale attack. This can be a mild dose of headaches, but also various stages of possession or full-scale takeover of the vessel. None of these ailments are cured by drugs, be it pharmaceutical or recreational. It can't be cured by a doctor, a nurse, or a hospital, and only a very few, and I mean very few, have the ability to cleanse you out once you become infected. We have to be aware, like I've said, that the alternative media is now being used as a tool for the sleight of hand people to drive not only policy but to deflect it as well. Get rich quick schemes. Now the only people who get rich quick are them at our expense, be it RVs, dinars, bitcoins and all the other crap. And I know many are struggling and the temptations are always there, but we have to be more clever. If synths want to chase lost causes and Ponzi schemes, let them be, but let us not follow their example. Pedogate was started by the alternative media and driven to a point whereby they had no option but to address it. We forced that issue, but they addressed it in a different way, and by using our drive to force it out into the open, they then tailored an agenda to force it further and remove the elements they no longer need or can afford to pay for anymore. So in essence, whilst we did fantastic to get it out into the open, they've come up with an idea that they will get rid of some of the elements by throwing them under the bus. Like I said, we'll still gain because we've still forced the issue. The key is keep forcing the issues, whether it's pedogate, government fraud, or rogue military, whatever it is, 9/11, high-powered energy weapons, false flags. We forced them into having to do something they didn't want to do. That's the gain we've made. But they have used that pedogate and taken it for their own ends. So now they're removing the elements they don't want. Now, some may disagree with that analysis, but this is how they operate. We have and we will get benefits from it, like I keep saying, as the faction war gathers apace. But we must also be aware we are being used as a tool as well. We have rogue elements amongst us, as well as the cabal. But to the goons who are in our community playing for their side, I'll leave you with one question. How long before they sacrifice you? Don't think they'll do that? It will. And maybe you'll go out in a blaze of glory. Maybe you won't. Hi all and welcome back to the final part of tonight's show. So, I hope people understand why I warned about conferences. Shane Aruna did a blog. I think Chloe's posted it on the Facebook page, and I'll get her to post it on the MeWe as well. Covered a lot about the covens and the dark magic. You know, what you got to remember is there's conferences by various people, but these conferences are ran by the covens. The Blue Chicken Group and that ensemble is all ran by the covens. Gaiam TV is ran by the covens, and they're deliberately misdirecting the truth to spin it out into a 50-year program. Do we want to wait 50 years for disclosure? You know, like I've said many times, there's many of you who have experienced it yourself, so you don't need disclosure. But we're not waiting, having them decide when we can have knowledge and when we can't. That's been the biggest problem on this planet, is knowledge. Right, Californication. I'll have more about California tomorrow, what's been going on there, and some of the hidden elements in an extra show tomorrow night. Alright, let's get into some questions and answers, but before that, to balance it out, is in the past month, and this is yet to be seen, but it has been felt. is a couple of filings have been done that have kicked the cabal in the nuts heavily, and they're unlikely to recover. So there is, whilst there's a lot of unpleasant things going on, rest assured, because I have seen the evidence, and again, you have to take my word for it. I've never let you down before. We're not without our own tools to fight back, and they know they're in a fight, and ultimately they will lose. I've got no doubts that we will not win out. My only misgivings is how ugly it will get between now and then. You know, I could sit here for 3 hours spouting good news that they're doing this and they're doing that and they're raiding Langley, but it's not the case as yet. It's far more covert than what's being spread across the internet by largely Langley agents, scripted writing. But I also need you to understand we are fighting back heavily, and this is kind of why what you're feeling and sensing at the moment, and this is why everything is appearing and is chaotic. Let's get into some questions. There's a number on the Kingdom of Mana and the UPU this week, which is rather strange, but we'll answer them all. And one that was held over: did Levashov ever explain why he thought we should all stop drinking coffee? The latest findings supposedly say 3 cups daily prevents all kinds of causes of death. Well, this is kind of a problem for some, but not for others. You know, some have peanut allergies. Some will eat peanuts all day. And so it's a case of not one size fits all. You know, some people drinking coffee, it doesn't do them good. Sends them a bit too excitable. Others, like myself, I used to drink 9 to 12 cups a day. I'm now down to about 3. I've no idea why. Perhaps it's better coffee. Or perhaps it's because Chloe makes it and not the hideous ex-wife. So I don't know. Whatever the reason is, I'm down to 3 a day. And it's never affected me when I was drinking 12 or 3. I get a lot less illnesses than most people. And so it hasn't done me any bad or harm. Any word from the Kingdom of Mana and any word from the ETs you interviewed last year? And this kind of plays into another question. Where is it? There's about 4. Have you heard anything more from the Kingdom of Mana? Was another question. And I'll answer the UPU Council one later. The Kingdom of Mana is one of the UPU. She was one of the 3. Of course, we've had her back on since. The UPU largely has gone into the background. Their choice. And maybe they'll come back one day and we'll do another show. I don't know at this point. But it can only honour their wishes to step away at this time. There's lots of threats going on and not everyone can handle it. You have no idea the threats going on. It's not just the top people are being threatened. It's not just radio show hosts or Kingdom of Mana. You've got chief executives of big corporations are being threatened by certain agencies and other groups, shall I say. I don't want to say too much. So that's the Kingdom of Mana chips in, and they provide some of the intel. So I'm kind of in touch with them on a daily basis, or certainly every other day. But the others, the translator girls, have kind of gone into the background at the moment. A former cop who shot an unarmed black man gets 20 years in prison. The judge sentences former North Charleston police officer Michael Slager to 20 years in prison for fatally shooting Walter Scott in 2015, an incident that a bystander captures on video. Will we be seeing more of these kind of verdicts? Yes and no. It just depends on the area and whether certain cops are human or not, and whether certain cops are connected with certain funny handshake groups. So this is a mix, but what I can tell you is there's uproar on all levels at the moment. Be it agency people fighting agency people, Pentagon fighting Pentagon people, FBI fighting FBI, justice people are fighting each other also. And government people are fighting each other, no matter which party they're from. And this is all part of the chaos that's ongoing currently. When you speak of hooks in shows, can you please explain what this means? Yes, I can. Where are we? Yeah, I'll answer that. There's about 3 or 4 questions in this. The hooks, the 5 main hooks where they pull you in to a program are money, sex, religion, drugs, and alcohol. This was kind of covered in what's called the Levershoff shows, but we titled it Humanity Unplugged and Humanity Unplugged 2. And it goes into how drugs and alcohol create holes in your aura, or what is known as the PSI field. That's your shielding. And this is where these dark magicians and these entities and jinns and demon spirits can hook in. And so they'll use the drugs, which causes holes in you. Alcohol, excessive alcohol, causes holes in you. Religion, because of the program. You think it's all about being nice and morals and this, when it's got a very dark hidden agenda. The God and the Lord are not who you think it is. It's so far removed from what you think it is. It's just not funny. And that's a hook, which is then promoting you expanding your energy outwards, which is then collected and harvested by these entities. The minute you pray out to anyone you think is higher than you, you are basically sending your life force energy to entities that you can't see that are using it up on you. This is why a lot of people's immune systems are weak at the moment, and why so many people are sick. Because the vessel can't sustain it. There's too many are taking drugs, too many are drinking too much alcohol. Sexual perversion is another one. So they're the 5 hooks that they pull you into a program. When you reference the page, are you speaking about Facebook or MeWe? 95% of the time it's Facebook. but sometimes I will post on both pages if I get the time. Also, can't find the list of people attending the Desert Conference who are now connected with the covens you mentioned in the show. I understand completely it is my choice with regard to whom I listen to or engage with, and I do not hold anyone responsible for my actions but myself. But the information I request would be of benefit to me. Just type in Contact in the Desert 2018 and it will bring up all the list of the speakers who knowingly, in some cases, unknowingly in a small amount of cases, are working for the covens. Is it possible some synths don't know that they're not human? Correct. I would suggest most of them. Where are we next? Is the real reason for chemtrailing to slow down our awakening? Well, it can have that effect, but chemtrails can have a plethora of reasons for doing so. It can create a holographic screen. It can have stuff in it that creates illness, aiding the pharmaceutical giants. Or the worst aspects of it, it can have nanoparticles in it, which then they can use you as a biobot. And so take your pick. So none of it is for our benefit. Holographic screen is probably the least of our worries. The other two of making you sick and again weakening your immune system, which then has knock-on effects for the way you feel. It's like one of the chat person, Victoria, you know, she broke a leg, was it May? It's still broken. Me personally don't think that's a coincidence. I've gone through most of the operations I have had, which was 16. I think 11 of them went wrong. I don't think that's a coincidence either. And so, yet again, using Victoria as an example, she feels down and the whole world's going wrong and nothing's working and it's all dark. And that's what happens when you get yourself into these situations where you can have a broken leg or an illness. It slows everything down and you start then, because you've got more time on your hands. Most people, when they have more time on their hands, start going into negative thoughts, which again is not helping your awakening and not helping you to thrive. So that's the gist of chemtrails. I remember Humanity Unplugged, the G-Note, and how its connection to the it's a connection to the higher self, but I'm uncertain if I'm grasping what it does. Well, there's a number of things. And it happens on all different levels, the G. Now, when conditions allow, and another change of dimensional space, and conditions arise for what is the final primary matter, the 7 primary matters, and G is the final one, and the 7 kinds of primary matter make up the blueprint for forming universes, galaxies, planets and solar systems, etc., etc. It has to have the right conditions for those 7 primary matters to take place for then those material spheres to materialize. So these create at the same time 6 material spheres, or bodies of different compositions and size, and the center sphere of those 7, from our perspective, is the physical planet Earth. So they're the 7 primary matter that creates the physical planet Earth, the 7th one, and G is part of that. Now, part of the stuff that goes on in the universe is the heavier radiation elements that are involved in this process. If they do not disintegrate in the same manner, this then leads to an excess of the G matter, which is the final stage for life and planets, flowing out from the physical to the etheric level. And then a loss of G matter from the nuclei leads it to disintegrate as a result. And this is kind of what's happened here and many places in this universe. And it also, by the loss of the G matter, leads to create the conditions of non-organic life forms. Sound familiar? Should do. Part of these non-organic living forms are synthetics, archons, and non-corporeal entities. Again, something I covered in that op-ed piece in the second hour. This is what happens when there's an imbalance, particularly of the G, that causes this inorganic life forms. So that the loss of the G matter or the G sound frequency also leads to the possibility of non-organic life. And the loss of G was deemed important here for us to develop further on a spiritual, personal, evolutional development level. So without the G, it provided an imbalance in the whole system. And the reality is this has been much of the cause of the interference, not only here, but multiverse-wide. So where there was conditions for life, they pulled out the G matter. And this allows these other entities to then take over. Largely ones you can't see. And ultimately what happened then is you lost your connection to your true higher self, was cut off via the siphoning of the G matter, which then put us in a construct. And the channels through the 7 stages or realms of the human evolution was blocked or severed at the etheric levels. So you then, when you went into dream time, which is more wake time than actual dream time, all you encountered was those on the lower astral level. These are the sources of nightmares. And what I was told 2 or 3 years ago now, and I spent 18 months trying to find out what it means or what it meant, is the GNA, not RNA or DNA, the GNA was being restored, is what I was told. And the level of the people being able to reconnect to their whole higher selves, not the portion of it, the whole version, and subsequently source, has increased with the return of the G matter. Now, many of people have been hearing a sound in the right ear, and those of you who remember that show, I played the sound, the G note. It's the same noise. So that tells you that G is returning. And as that increases, the chances of inorganic life existing here becomes 0. They can't exist. So I hope that answers your question, albeit a long-winded one, but there's a lot to that. Is the reason for saying so the elites can break through to the heavenly realms so they can avoid going back to the hellish realms? No, it was my understanding it was an escape route out of here after they destroyed it. That was their plan, to create a wormhole, portal, Stargate that took them right to out of this system altogether. Except it failed. And people can argue all they like. They're firing this up and they're firing that up. They can fire it up all they like. It won't work for the intent, the original intent they had for it. That ended in 2015. That's why it went quiet for the last 3 years. Every now and again, a bit like NASA and its we're all going to die document, it pops up and then dies a quick death because no one's paying any attention to it anymore, which is good. Is transhumanism part of a lower realm? No, it's part of people thinking they are above source, God, whatever you want to call it, and life longevity, where they don't return to source and have their judgment day with themselves. They'll have to face themselves. So by not going back to source, they don't have to face their own judgment, which is harsh. We're all more harsh in judging ourselves than we are with others, generally anyway. So they're trying to cheat going back to source so they can continue the insanity of controlling the few, because once it gets to that far, there will be about 500,000 people left, or 500 million, except they won't get that far. They can try. Do you know anything about the Dogon tribe in Africa? Yes, I've met a member of the Dogon tribe 6 years ago. Interesting guy, interesting group. Now the Dogon are part of worship and entities that came down, known as the Fish People, which is eerily similar to what the hats the bishops, cardinals wear, with the 2 points. And this particular tribe were visited over a long period of time by a group from the Sirius system, and they taught them things and they told them where they were from. And in 1927 there was an expedition there, and they would every year they do a ceremony to the fish people from the sky. And there was an older gentleman, expeditioner, who was there, and one of his assistants who was rather young. I think he was less than 20, 17 to 20. And this was in 1927, and the tribe people drew in the sand, pointed to the star, and drew three stars, 3 suns, with 3 very different orbits around Sirius. Now, the astronomers could only see one main sun, and it wasn't until 1978, I think it was, that astronomers got more powerful telescopes and realised there was actually 3 suns in Sirius with 3 very different orbits, and it was exactly the way the tribe in Africa had drew in the sand in 1927 without telescopes. Now, just by chance, or was it a coincidence, or was it not, the young assistant who was there was also there at the announcement in the astronomical place in the UK, Greenwich, when it was announced, and he goes, they said that 50 years ago. So they call them the fish people. They looked like fish that were floating. So that's, I hope that answers your question. But it's about worship of entities from Sirius. But actually not too good. Particularly from Sirius B anyway. Was the reason for the Great Flood to destroy the Tower of Babel? No, it was to get rid of humans. They were getting too strong. What do you know about the Getty Museum? Not much. I know it's got some only what I've seen on the internet, but I don't know any deeper details than probably what you've already read on the internet. I can ask. Operation Keelhaul, that was to do with the handing back, a bit like Paperclip in reverse, only involving America, Britain, Germany, and handing back prisoners of war to Russia. Of course, it was already pre-arranged long before the end of the war. It's all stage managed, the whole lot of it, like Paperclip. That was arranged before the end of the war. So that's the gist, or the most I know about Operation Keelhaul. Where are we next? Oh, I said I wouldn't share questions, but I could have quite easily shared this one. But apparently this question is Drake a pedo, wanting little girls to sit on his lap? So I asked for more clarification on why that question was asked. And from all accounts in a recent show, Drake said he'd like to play the bad Santa and have the young girls sitting on his lap. Whether he meant it that way, I'm not sure. I don't know. I haven't listened to the piece. But either way, sadly it's kind of classic Drake, the shock value. Sometimes he deeply regrets the stuff he says, but Drake is all about creating shock value. Of course, people will remember the issue of surrounding Lavoy Finicum just after he'd been murdered in cold blood, and Drake turned around and says he deserved all he got. Again, it's shock value. I don't believe that that's what Drake really meant or wanted. Sometimes people say things for shock value, for clickbait, for shows. But at the end of the day, you have to stand behind those words. And that is clearly, if that's exactly what he said, is clearly inappropriate. I don't get he's one of them. But I still don't understand, if he did say that, why he said it. Maybe that question is best asked for Drake's show. I'm reading Behold the Pale by William Cooper through the Think Different site. Would it be possible to get this as a download so I don't have to be online to read it? It's such a great historical reference that I'd like to be able to read it anywhere rather than have it to be at home with my laptop to read it. I don't know who posted that. I think that was one of the admins who did that. I've never read it, and I haven't got a copy, so I can't really help you with that, but maybe one of the members will. There's another question as well than that answer. Could you please tell me if Patty Brassard and Karen MacDonald are still sending out whistleblower information, and where I could hear it or see it, please? I have no idea whether they are. Karen has some valid knowledge and apparently has some healing abilities. As for the other half, pass. No comment. But each to their own. Is it possible that World War I and World War II were in fact the first corporation war and the second corporation war, if they were in fact nurtured and encouraged to grow like elite banker food crops? Well, World War I and World War II were staged events. It was planned, but it was stated as a prophecy, which really means elite plan. Everywhere you see the term prophecy means it's a plan for a further date. And Albert Pike laid out a plan in 1888 about World War I, which would be about smashing the Russian Tsars and stealing all their wealth. World War II is about the gold that they had found hidden in Asia. World War III, which they've been trying to implement since 1990 and have failed ever since, was a clash of the civilizations between the Christians and the Muslims. Here we are, 129 years later, and they're still trying to pull that off. And sadly, far too many, in my opinion, are still falling for that narrative. The issue is not Christians or the Muslims, and everything to do with the hidden hand. Clash of the civilizations. The Christians wipe the Muslims out, and the Muslims wipe the Christians out, and then they come in their walled city around Jerusalem and rule the New World Order under one world religion. That's their plan. Personally, I don't think it'll come off, but I just wish more people would be less of the angst against Muslims. They're pawns in the game. Is there bad Muslims? Yeah. Is there bad white people? Yeah. Black people, Hispanics? Yeah. There's bad people in every group and every religion also. But that doesn't mean you have to completely incinerate just because they're Muslims. And all this, I received an email about they're trying to implement Sharia law, and this is the Muslims. No, it's not the Muslims pushing Sharia law. It's the elites, again, L-ites. That's why they call themselves elites. It's El, which means God. Godites. They think they're God. So they think they have the right to rule over us. And they'll use groups, be it Muslims, be it Nazis, whatever you want to do, call it. The Israeli people call Jews, think all Jews are Zionist. That's ignorance in the highest form. There's good Israeli people campaigning to get Netanyahu and Mossad and the troop goons out of Israel, so then they can knock the wall down and have peace with the Palestinians. Lots of them. You won't hear that on Clinton News Network or the BBC or Sky, Fox, you name it. You won't hear. They don't want you to hear that. They want you to hear that the Muslims are attacking Israel and the Muslims are attacking Europe and everywhere else. ISIS. Well, we all know who ISIS is. Langley. They're not Muslims. They're just pure filth. And so, to answer your question, yes, it was corporations. Because we haven't had an American government in anyone who listens to this show lifetime. The last time was 146 years ago, 1871, which is when the Organic Constitution bit the dust. Everything else is a corporation. If you want to know more about that, the person who asked that question, go and watch what's called The Faction Show. I think it's called that. Maybe it's always called, a bit like the Levashof's called Humanity Unplugged. But I think it was called The Faction Show. Anyway, it was done on November the 8th, 2015. It explains that prophecy stroke plan. 1888. Is there any collaboration between the UPU and the Kingdom of Manor regarding the global collateral accounts? There's collaboration between the Council and the Kingdom of Manor. When anything can be released, you get to hear of it the very next show. If there's nothing to be released, nothing gets said. It's not unlike this next question or set of questions. To my knowledge, the Universal Council and the Universal Protection Unit have only appeared in one interview with you in August 2016. My main question is, why should we believe that they only have good intentions for humanity, including Earth, especially with its abundant water and other natural resources? Nobody asks you to believe. It's your choice. If you don't believe, that's your choice. But the idea for that show was to ask all the relevant questions on and intentions. I myself have little trust in ETs because all of them at various stages have trampled all over humanity for aeons. But asking me why we should believe, I'm not asking you to believe anything. That's what the show is for, to provide information and for you to make your own choice. The person went on, I'm asking because even though they talked a good talk, they expect us to blindly trust them. No, you did. If you don't trust them, you don't trust them. It's as simple as that. They didn't come on to get you to blindly trust them. You shouldn't blindly trust anyone, including me. Wouldn't say who they were. Well, they did. Cancelled a subsequent interview with you, which they never, and failed to make their public announcement and have apparently vanished. Awful lot of assumption in that statement. They made the public announcement by being on the show. They never arranged another interview with me. That particular interview that was cancelled by Shane Laroona. Nothing to do with the UPU. The person goes on, there's too many red flags for me, not to mention their thinly veiled new age message of don't worry, be happy, we got this. In my mind, that is a setup for further enslavement. My last two questions are, what are your current thoughts about them, and did they ever contact you again? Well, like I said, if you choose to not believe, that's fine. But you've made an awful lot of assumptions in there. You know, if you want more details, ask the question. Don't put it over in a way where you've already passed your judgment and are asking me to counteract it. I'm not going to counteract anything of your judgment. If that's what you believe, that's fine. But there was no cancelled interview. They did make a public announcement. Have they vanished? No, they're still around. They're just not partaking in the alternative media currently, or two of them aren't. One of them came back and did the Kingdom of Mana show in August. And I expect the Kingdom of Mana, Miss Mana as we call her, to come back on again, maybe before the end of the year, or maybe early in January, to give an update. But if it doesn't fit what you fit in with yourself, that's fine. But ask the questions in a manner where you want to learn different things, not prejudge and then ask me to counteract it. That's not fair. If you don't believe it, you don't believe it. It's as simple as that. If we are the awakened, would we have, I'm assuming it means, would we have difficulty to cross the rainbow? What chance do the others have? Not much. Like everything else, some people train for certain things. Let's use an athlete. People can train all day to become a 100-meter sprinter, but not everyone's going to make it, are they? Some will run the 100 meters in 30 seconds, and some will do it in 10. So they're never going to be able to compete in that. And the same applies when you are growing evolutionary. Some people who you don't think would make it because they're not successful in life are actually the ones that are making it on an evolutionary scale. So you can never can tell. But if they don't have the knowledge, then the chances are a lot slimmer, but they've chosen to ignore the knowledge. That's their choice. Like the person with the previous question. If we cross and decide to return to the others, wouldn't it be like the loop again? No. The loop, that particular system is gone. There'll be two separate, so that looping back and joining up again in the figure 8 Mobius, which is a closed system, the two sides of it will cross over and go on separate paths. Two different wave frequencies. One organic, one inorganic. So there's no 13,000 year loop again. When, if we return, are we returning to our own body fully awakened or something else? That depends on your own evolutionary levels. Everyone's going to be different. You know, some people make the transition, some people don't. Are you service to self or service to others? And it's not dependent on whether you've done some bad things as a kid either. It's the balance over the lifetime. Have you been largely service to others or largely service to the self? Have you largely, over the balance of your life, done good things rather than bad? Put it this way, the Rothschilds, none of them will be making it. Or the Bushes, or the Cheneys, or the Rumsfelds of this world. None of them will be making it. They're not of the right evolutionary level. They're stuck in the lower astral hell realm. That's basically what the lower astral is. Hell. The upper astral is what we term on earth as heaven. A state of bliss. It's not an actual place, it's a state within yourself. And you can either be in chaos or you can be in calm. Which is why we keep talking about keep the balance. I hope that answers your question anyway. Is there a time loop in the media? There's many things that are in the media. Synths. Biobots. Lies, distortion. Or just complete bullshittery. I remember posting an article a few weeks ago about humans will worship AI Messiah, only to find it reported again in a British paper on December 11th. Am I seeing this a lot? I am seeing this a lot. Or am I in a temporal loop? There's bleed-throughs. I've said this before, it's the two worlds thing. I'm seeing elements of both sides at various times. All looks the same, but there's subtle differences. Eventually that separation will be permanent and you will be stuck in the organic. No more synths, no more hideous darker elements. There will be darker elements, but not to the levels that we've experienced in this system. I think that's the last question. I answered the Trump declaring Jerusalem the capital. Yep, that's with respect to the sleepers and those immersed in their false reality, going forward, will the truth be revealed only to those who actively look for it? Or at some point will the man behind the curtain be revealed, especially to the people of the US? I understand not wanting to cause panic, however, letting the ignorance just go on does not seem right to me. Well, the ignorance is not really going on, is it? Because we do know about it. Yes, there's always more deeper details, and you get into every nook and cranny of dissecting one particular item, but the ignorance is not going on for us because we know about Petergate. We know some people know about ETs. Some people know about banking corruption. So this is why we're in panic, or the world seems in panic, because we found out about things, the hidden realms, that they didn't want us to find out about. In times past, there was always awake people, the critical thinkers, but they didn't have a vehicle to all corroborate and engage with people in other countries. With the internet, which was a tool against us, we've turned it the other way, and suddenly we're talking to people in Australia and India and China and Russia and all over the world. That's what it's done. So we're not ignorant. And the reality is some of the people who choose not to look are not ignorant either. They're making a choice to act ignorant because it's too uncomfortable for them to face reality. You can't tell me that none of them are not aware of at least one or more items that was classed as conspiracy, which has now been proven not a conspiracy at all. Look at how many now believe that 9/11 was a false flag and an inside job. Pedogate, again, it's just a conspiracy theory. Oh, you're talking rubbish. The churches are all interfering with kids. Actually, we weren't. Hollywood interfering with kids and young adults. Actually, we weren't, were we? Politicians being corrupt. Politicians being pedophiles. Politicians creating wars based on bogus evidence. All of that is now not classed as conspiracy anymore because it's out in the mainstream media. That's because of us. And because we got safety in numbers of people all over the world. I mentioned last week about some of the countries that listen to this show. You know, who would have thought we would have 19, 20 people from Bangladesh listening to an American radio show? Bangladesh. So this is the impact that the alternative media has had in a good way. But the ignorance hasn't gone on because only the deliberately ignorant have chosen to ignore it. They can't face reality, and maybe they are not reality to begin with. They're just a program. Something to think on. Right, I think that's enough. Probably gone on a bit longer than I would have liked tonight, with another show tomorrow. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of positive going on, and there is negative going on. We can't ignore that. But there is sufficient balance behind the scenes being applied. Efforts have ramped up on both sides. We did warn this would take place, and we're continuing to kick the cabal where it hurts heavily. Maybe hammers are not hitting them with hammers are not the right tool anymore. we've gone with heavy artillery, and they don't like it. So this song will probably say a lot to head out with tonight, and never be in fear of the dark, because the dark is coming into the light, whether they want to or not. This has been the Truth, Honour and Integrity Show. My name's Thomas Williams. I'll be back at 7:30 tomorrow. Bye for now.